Book 1, Chapter 3, Part 2. I took the folder and looked for a place to sit down. Here the forest was dense with small bushes and was slightly soggy, but to the east the land rose towards what looked like another knoll. I decided to walk in that direction in search of dry ground. At the top of the rise I was awestruck. It was another spot of incredible beauty. The gnarled oaks were spaced about 50 feet apart, and their wide limbs grew completely together at the top, creating a canopy overhead. On the forest floor grew broad-leaved tropical plants, which stood 4 or 5 feet high and had leaves on them 10 inches in width. These plants were interspersed with large ferns and bushes, lush with white flowers. I picked out a dry place and sat down. I could smell the musty odor of the leaves and the fragrance of the blossoms. I opened the folder and turned to the beginning of the translation. A brief introduction explained that the third insight brings a transformed understanding of the physical universe. Its words clearly echoed Sarah's summary. Sometime near the end of the second millennium, it predicted, humans would discover a new energy which formed the basis of and radiated outward from all things, including ourselves. I pondered that idea for a moment, then read something that fascinated me. The manuscript said that human perception of this energy first begins with a heightened sensitivity to beauty. As I thought about this, the sound of someone walking along the path below drew my attention. I saw Sarah at the exact moment she looked towards the knoll and spotted me. "This is a great place," she said when she reached me. "Have you come to the part about perception of beauty yet?" "Yes, but I'm not sure what it means." Further in the manuscript, it goes into it in more detail, but I'll explain it briefly. The perception of beauty is a kind of barometer telling each of us how close we are to actually perceiving the energy. This is clear because once you observe the energy, you realize it's on the same continuum as beauty. "You sound like you see it." She looked at me without the slightest self-consciousness. "Yes, I do. But the first thing I developed was a deeper appreciation of beauty." "But how does that work? Isn't beauty relative?" She shook her head. "The things that we perceive as beautiful may be different, but the actual characteristics we ascribe to beautiful objects are similar. Think about it. When something strikes us as beautiful, it displays more presence and sharpness of shape and vividness of color, doesn't it? It stands out. It shines. It seems almost iridescent compared to the dullness of other objects less attractive." I nodded. "Look at this spot. I know you were blown away by it because we all are. This place leaps out at you. The colors and shapes seem magnified. Well, the very next level of perception is to see an energy field hovering about everything." I must have looked bewildered because she laughed, then said very seriously, "Perhaps we should walk onto the gardens. They're about a half-mile farther south. I think you'll find them interesting." I thanked her for the time to explain the manuscript to me, a total stranger, and for showing me around Vicient. She shrugged her shoulders. "You seem like a person friendly to what we're trying to do, and we all know we're involved in a public relations effort here. For this research to continue, we must get word out to the United States and elsewhere. The local authorities don't seem to like us much." Suddenly, a voice called out from behind us. "Excuse me, please." We turned to see 3 men walking quickly up the path towards us. All appeared to be in their late 40s and were dressed in stylish clothes. "Would one of you tell me where the research gardens are?" the taller of the 3 asked. "Could you tell me what your business here is?" Sarah asked in return. "My colleagues and I have permission from the owner of this estate to examine the gardens and to speak with someone about the so-called research being conducted here. We are from the University of Peru." "Sounds as though you're not in agreement with our findings," Sarah said, smiling, obviously trying to lighten the situation. "Absolutely not. We think it's preposterous to claim that some mysterious energy can now be seen, when it has never been observed before." "Have you tried to see it?" The man ignored the question and asked again, "Can you direct us to the gardens?" "Of course. About 100 yards ahead you will see a path turning east. Take it, and maybe a quarter of a mile down you'll run into them." "Thank you," the tall man said as they hurried on their way. You sent them in the wrong direction. Not really. There are other gardens in that area, and the people there are more prepared to talk with these kind of skeptics. We get people like this here occasionally, and it's not just scientists, but curiosity seekers as well. People who can't begin to grasp what we're doing, which points out the next problem that exists in the scientific understanding. What do you mean? As I said before, the old skeptical attitude was great when exploring the more visible and obvious phenomena in the universe, such as trees or sunshine or thunderstorms. But there is another group of observable phenomena, more subtle, that you can't study. In fact, you can't even tell if they're there at all, unless you suspend or bracket your skepticism and try every way possible to perceive them. Once you can, then you can return to your rigorous study. Interesting. Ahead the woods ended, and I could see dozens of cultivated plots, each one growing a different type of plant. Most seemed to be food-bearing types, everything from bananas to spinach. At the eastern border of each crop was a wide gravel path which ran north to what appeared to be a public road. 3 metal outbuildings were spaced along the path. 4 or 5 people worked near each one. "I see some friends of mine," Sarah said, and pointed towards the closest building. "Let's go over there. I'd like for you to meet them." Sarah introduced me to 3 men and 1 woman, all of whom were involved in the research. The men spoke with me briefly, then excused themselves to continue their work, but the woman, a biologist named Marjorie, seemed free to talk. I caught Marjorie's eye. "What exactly are you researching here?" I asked. "It's hard to know where to start. Are you familiar with the manuscript?" "The first sections of it. I have just begun the 3rd insight." "Well, that's what we're all about here. Come on, I'll show you." She motioned for me to follow her, and we walked around the metal building to a plot of beans. I noticed they appeared to be exceptionally healthy, with no noticeable insect damage or dead leaves. The plants were growing in what appeared to be a highly humus, almost fluffy soil, and each plant was carefully spaced, the stems and leaves of one growing near but never touching those of the next. She pointed to the closest plant. "We've tried to look at these plants as total energy systems and think of everything they needed to flourish: soil, nutrients, moisture, light. What we have found is that the total ecosystem around each plant is really one living ecosystem, one organism, and the health of each of the parts impacts the health of the whole." She hesitated, then said, "The basic point is that once we started thinking about the energy relationships all around the plant, then we started seeing amazing results. The plants in our studies were not particularly larger, but according to nutritional criteria, they were more potent." "How was that measured?" "They contained more protein, carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals." She looked at me expectantly. "But that wasn't the most amazing thing. We found that the plants which had the most direct human attention were even more potent." "What kind of attention?" "You know, fiddling with the ground around them, checking them every day, that sort of thing. We set up an experiment with a control group, some getting special attention, others not, and the finding was confirmed. What's more, we expanded the concept and had a researcher not just give attention, but to mentally ask them to grow stronger. The person would actually sit with them and focus all his attention and concern on their growth." "Did they grow stronger?" "Yeah, by significant amounts, and they also grew faster." "That's incredible." "Yes, it is." Her voice trailed off as she watched an older man, appearing to be in his 60s, walk towards us. "The gentleman approaching is a micronutritionist," she said discreetly. "He came down here about 5 years ago for the first time and immediately took a leave of absence from Washington State University. His name is Professor Haynes. He's done some great studies." As he arrived, I was introduced. He was a strongly built man with black hair, gray streaks at his temples. After some prodding from Marjorie, the professor began to summarize his research. He was most interested, he told me, in the functioning of the body's organs as measured by highly sensitive blood tests, especially as this functioning related to the quality of food eaten. He told me what interested him most were the results of a particular study which showed that while nutritionally rich plants of the kind grown at Vicente increased the body's efficiency dramatically, the increase was beyond what could be reasonably expected from the nutrients themselves, as we understand how they work in human physiology. Something inherent of the structures of these plants created an effect not yet accounted for. I looked at Marjorie, then asked, "Then the focusing of attention on these plants gave them something that boosts human strength in return when they're eaten? Is this the energy mentioned in the manuscript?" Marjorie looked at the professor. He gave only a half smile. "I don't know yet." I asked him about his future research, and he explained that he wanted to duplicate the garden at Washington State and set up some long-term studies to see if people eating these plants had more energy or were healthier over a longer period of time. As he spoke, I couldn't help glancing periodically at Marjorie. Suddenly, she looked incredibly beautiful. Her body appeared long and slender, even under her baggy jeans and t-shirt. Her eyes and hair were dark brown, and her hair fell in tarped curls around her face. I felt a powerful physical attraction. At the exact moment I had become aware of this, she turned her head, stared directly into my eyes, and backed away from me a step. "I've got to go meet someone. Maybe I'll see you later." She told Haynes goodbye, smiled coyly at me, and walked past the metal building and down the path. After a few more minutes of discussion with the professor, I wished him well and strolled back to where Sarah was standing. She was still talking intensely with one of the other researchers, but she followed me with her eyes as I walked. As I approached, the man she was with smiled, rearranged the notes on his clipboard, and walked into the building. "Find out anything?" Sarah asked. "Yes, it sounds like these folks are doing some interesting things," I said distractedly. I was looking at the ground when she said, "Where did Marjorie go?" As I glanced up, I could see she had an amused look on her face. "She said she had to meet someone." "Did you turn her off?" she asked, smiling now. I laughed. "I guess I did, but I didn't say a thing." "You didn't have to. Marjorie could detect a change in your field. It was pretty obvious. I could see it all the way over here." "A change in my what?" "In the energy field around your body. Most of us have learned to see them, at least in certain light. When a person has sexual thoughts, the person's energy field sort of swirls about and actually propels out towards the person that's the object of the attraction." This struck me as totally fantastic, but before I could comment, we were distracted by several people coming out of the metal building. "Time now for the energy projections," Sarah said.